The Maya were the region's earliest known sedentary people, around 4,000 years ago. They settled in Soconusco on the south coast, now the Mexican state of Chiapas. But the Olmec people were the first to form a recognizable, advanced civilization with agriculture, art, politics, science, and toward their demise, basic literacy. They established themselves around 1,500 years before the Common Era in the area known as San Lorenzo Tenochtitlan on Mexico's Gulf Coast. At this time, much of Mesoamerica was still populated by small, migrant hunter-gatherer clans. Sedentary societies would not become the norm for another few hundred years. So the Olmec were able to expand their empire through much of modern-day Mexico. They began to decline around 500 years before the Common Era and eventually disappeared 300 years later. Also around 500 years before the Common Era, and about 200 kilometers southeast of Mexico City, in what is today's Mexican state of Oaxaca, the Zapotec people began to flourish and establish their own civilization. It was originally formed from 3 neighboring societies who had previously been enemies. They were the most powerful group in the area, and within a few hundred years had greatly expanded their area of dominance. Their most famous historical site is Monte Alban, which has a building dubbed the Conquest Slab. It appears to record the history of the spread of Zapotec power in one of the earliest writing systems ever found in Mesoamerica. There is written evidence that not all their expansion was met with resistance. Therefore, the Zapotec may be the first in a long history of colonizers of Mesoamerica. Although they were ultimately conquered by the Spanish in the early 16th century, the Zapotec's descendants survive to this day. They are still the largest indigenous group in Oaxaca, and modern dialects of their language are spoken as far away as Los Angeles in the United States. Emerging some 1,500 years after the Zapotec, and residing just west of them, were the lesser-known Mixtec people. In fact, the Mixtec seized control of Monte Alban from the Zapotec. Their ancient writings have survived in greater number than those of any Mesoamerican peoples. Their descendants live on in parts of Mexico and the United States. The Toltec people dominated Tula in what is now the Mexican state of Hidalgo from 800 to 1000 of the Common Era. That is, if they existed at all. Scholars still debate whether the Toltec were ethnically and culturally different from the Aztec. The Aztec themselves dominated southern and central Mexico from the early 13th century until the Spanish conquest. At the heart of their empire was Tenochtitlan, known today as Mexico City. At various times in their history, they had cultural ties and probably trading relationships with other Mesoamerican peoples, such as the Zapotec and Mixtec, occasionally waging war with them as well. It is within this broad geographic, historic, and ethnographic context that we must place the ancient Maya.